Here's what's coming today on the Woodworking Network podcast.
You know, the world has changed a lot since the 20th century. People don't expect to work for a company for 30 years. They don't orient their lives around retirement programs.
Welcome to this episode of the Woodworking Network podcast. Join us as we explore the business of woodworking, big and small, and what it takes to succeed. I'm Will Sampson. Today's episode is sponsored by FDMC Magazine. We'll be talking about the concept of an employee ownership trust with Ted Hall, the innovative founder of ShopBot, a manufacturer of CNC routers. But first, I want to talk about open books in business. Historically, business management has been a lot like poker. If you're in charge, you never reveal the cards you are holding until the deal is done. You don't share the numbers with employees, just like you don't share the numbers with competitors. But there has recently been a shift in some circles to revisit that secrecy, at least in relation to sharing financial information with employees. This is not a new idea, but it seems to be gaining ground. Proponents argue that opening the books to employees gives them a fuller understanding of the business and helps make them a more productive part of the team. Opponents counter that most employees don't understand business and will draw false conclusions from their own analysis of the financials. Also, opening the books to employees runs the risk of confidential data escaping outside the company and perhaps winding up in the hands of competitors. At the recent executive briefing conference, I was fascinated by how many attendees brought up in conversation the book, The Great Game of Business, which advocates for sharing your financials with your team. Subtitled, The Only Sensible Way to Run a Company, the book was written by Jack Stack and Bo Burlingham and was first published more than 8 years ago. It tells the story of how Stack turned around a company that was facing bankruptcy. The book and other tales of Stack's success have spawned an army of consultants and countless business advocates sold on the business transparency model. I confess I haven't read the book yet. It's on a long list I have to get to. But I'm intrigued by what is giving the open book model more traction in today's business climate. Most of the open book companies I've encountered find transparency a great way to get employees actively invested in the future success of the company. But of course, there are a lot more companies operating the old-fashioned way in tight secrecy and doing just as well. And lots of companies operate somewhere in the middle, revealing some financial data and keeping other numbers secret. But with the near universal problem of trying to find good employees, is business transparency a draw? Does it attract better candidates? I don't know. In my experience, typical new employees, and particularly younger employees, are woefully ignorant of the most basic business principles. To make an open book system work, it would seem to require a lot of education so all members of the team can understand what's going on. And there needs to be a direct connection to their financial success and the company's improving position. I'm reminded of a sole proprietor who came to one of my pricing talks once and was confused about the difference between labor and profit in a one-person operation. If you don't understand the fundamental of profit, it's pretty difficult to be in business. Still, I'm intrigued by the business transparency trend, its success stories, and the related trends involving profit sharing and employee ownership strategies. I've always felt that anything that encourages employees to be more invested in the company and take a less adversarial stand opposed to management has to be an improvement. Are you ready to open your books? Before we get to our interview with Ted Hall, let's pause for a word from our sponsor. FDMC Magazine is your vital source of information to improve your woodworking business, whether it is keeping you apprised of the latest advances in manufacturing, helping you solve your wood technology problems with Gene Wengert, or inspiring you with case histories about successful businesses and best practices. FDMC Magazine is there to be the sharpest business tool in your shop. Learn more and subscribe for free at woodworkingnetwork.com/FDMC. FDMC. Now let's get to my interview with Ted Hall, founder of ShopBot. My guest today is Ted Hall, the innovative founder of ShopBot, a pioneering manufacturer of CNC routers. After 25 years of developing automated machining solutions, he's now taking the company in a new direction as an employee ownership trust. Welcome to the Woodworking Network podcast, Ted.
Good to talk to you, Will.
We've done several podcasts related to company organization and exit strategies, but what exactly is an employee ownership trust? I'm not real familiar with that.
Well, it's a form of employee ownership that serves the purposes of creating a really strong forward-looking organization for employees, as well as, in the case of a lot of kind of setups like this, serve the needs of exiting owners. And so employee ownership in the United States is usually done by something called an ESOP, an employee stock ownership program. And the intent of an ESOP is great. It solves exiting owners issues. It offers tax breaks for them and for the ongoing company and the employees. But it's a very heavily administrative, bureaucratic, and expensive kind of thing. It's very limited, and it's focused on the idea of ownership being by way of a retirement plan.
I was going to say, isn't it all focused on retirement of employees? It's not really focused on continuing the company or anything like that.
No, it's focused on retirement of the company for sure. The orientation isn't to long-term persistence of the company. The point of an EOT is, first, it's a much simpler kind of thing. It's easier to accomplish. It's less expensive. It's highly flexible. But it's oriented to the moment. That is, employees share ownership by way of essentially an ongoing profit sharing kind of arrangement. It has nothing to do with their retirement plan. The company and the employees can still have both company plans and individual plans. The EOT doesn't have much to do with that. But it's a great way if you're operating in an organization where there is a lot of entrepreneurism, where you have a group of people who really want to keep pushing the company forward. It's a great way to transition the ownership to them, to a broad swath of the people, not just a couple of your management people.
So why specifically for ShopBot did you use this plan?
Well, there are a couple different ways to look at the, employee ownership, exit strategies, whatever. And it has to do, one way to see it is from the point of view of the employees. One way to view it is from the point of view of the community. And the third way to view it is from the point of view of the exiting owners. And for ShopBot and EOT offered a really attractive kind of way forward for each of those groups. First, it's, I think, the best kind of employee ownership, because since it's not organized around a retirement plan, it means that employees' participation is in the moment. You know, the world has changed a lot since the 20th century. People don't expect to work for a company for 30 years. They don't orient their lives around retirement programs. And that's very awkward with respect to the traditional ESOP. Whereas an EOT, the employee comes in, they benefit from being an employee an owner while they're gone. When they're gone, they're gone. You know, it has nothing to do with stock per se. The ownership of the company actually is the trust, the employee ownership trust, which holds the company for the benefit of the employees. And that means that they get the ongoing benefit, much as a shareholder would get ongoing dividends. In the case of ShopBot quarterly, a large company could do it monthly. Some companies may choose to do it yearly. we figure the more often you can do it and the closer it's related to the performance of the company, the more effective it is as a way to engage employees. And
well, that's more of a, getting paid now instead of pie in the sky when you retire.
Absolutely. And at ShopBot, we weekly do an open books management program, originally derived from Great Game of Business. But so we discuss weekly how the company's doing, what the profit's like, what it's going to be like at the end of the month, and project out to the quarter. So everybody knows how they're doing, whether we're doing well, whether they're going to make a little more money or not. And I think it's a great way to engage. Of course, employees also participate participate in the governance of the company because of the EOT. But it's kind of indirect. That is, they contribute to electing a portion of the board of directors. The board of directors then chooses the management team that runs the company. So managers are running the company just like they would any company owned by stockholders, trying to make it work as well for the stockholders as possible. In this case, it just turns out that the stockholders are all of the employees, including themselves. So, it's kind of a win-win orientation all around. And the employees get very engaged in sort of how the company works and what their contribution is to making it work well. So that's the employee side. What you're doing for the community is you're setting up a trust that is intended to perpetuate the company as long as possible. That is, it's a transition strategy, basically, that doesn't involve selling off the company, moving the company away. The jobs stay, the contribution of the company to the community remains, and so on. So, it's a very strong thing to do for the community.
Now, what about the previous shareholders?
And so then you have the third group, the exiting shareholders. And there, the solution that an EOT offers is very flexible. It can work in some ways the same way an ESOP does, and it works this way sort of for ShopBot, in that the trust transaction that creates it in one way or another can pay out to the existing or the exiting shareholders. In our case, in the case of maybe a larger company that had bigger assets, then the transaction could be immediate, and the trust could essentially buy out the shareholders. In our case, the shareholders had to finance the deal, and they do it over 10 years. That kind of arrangement could be set up in a number of different ways. At ShopBot, the way we wanted to do it, because we'd always been profit sharing, earnings sharing, everybody involved in kind of the operation of the company. The way we do that is we took kind of a modest valuation strategy, a multiple of EBITDA, and used that to derive a payout formula over a 10-year period, such that if the company does well, the existing owners will do well over that period. If the company tanks, and nothing happens, then the owners won't do that well. But if they had created any kind of a funded transaction, if they had contributed the loan in any way or another, if the company went bust, they'd still be out of luck. So I don't consider the fact that it's performance-based, also known as an earn-out or a contingent consideration. I don't consider the fact that it works that way as necessarily a downside. What it does mean is that the deal we put in place is not an albatross around the company's neck. That is, there's no loss of money unless the company is making money. It's not punitive in any way. And all of the normal profit sharing that goes on at a company. In our case, we had a strong profit sharing program anyway. All of that stays in place. So essentially, the transaction doesn't cost employees anything. And that encourages employees. So in the long run, I think it can work well for the exiting shareholders. They have to be patient. It takes time. And of course, you wouldn't want to do it if you didn't have a lot of confidence in the company, the management team, the sort of overall spirit of the thing anyway.
Well, that brings me to the next question of for other small manufacturers, which make up most of our audience, if they're considering various exit strategies, why should they consider an EOT?
Well, I don't necessarily want to really push this and sell it because, it may not be for everyone. In my case, I I like most owners, I believe, I should have thought about my exit strategy and transitioning out long before I did. But I was having too much fun and enjoying things too much. In the best of all worlds, if you're operating a small company that's growing, you might, as the owner or the shareholders, have an opportunity for a strategic exit where some larger, well-founded operation or individual decides that they want to take an ownership position and pay a hefty premium for it. But 95% of us won't ever have that opportunity for the strategic exit. And so the kind of sale that the average small business done is what people refer to as an investment sale. That is, those to whom the exiting owners look to sell the company to are people who have a very strong idea about what that value, what that company is worth based on what its performance has been and what they expect it to be. And often for a small business whose performance, just by definition of being small, is highly variable, the small business can easily find itself in a situation where performance valuation, typical EBITDA-based valuation, is not particularly attractive. And at the same time, you're essentially, throwing your hands up in the air and saying, okay, take this company, move it to California, do whatever you want with it. We just want to get it off our hands. Well, in my situation, I didn't feel like I wanted to just get this off my hands. I wanted to leave it in a situation where it seemed like it could thrive for all the people who've been working so hard there. And so we created this opportunity to transition out. I believe it'll be win-win because I have some confidence in how well the gang is going to do. But if they do well, they'll benefit. If they do well, the exiting shareholders will benefit too. And 10 years in our case seems like a long time, but we didn't really want to put any pressure on the management team. The EOT is structured in such a way that that deal could be closed out in an earlier time if the management team decides they want to make an investment in buying the shareholders out early.
I was going to ask, what happens if the business fails or the company is sold?
Well, because the existing shareholders essentially hold a note, they would be involved in the negotiations for any kind of sale. But the way the trust is set up, the company is not structured to be attractive for a sale. The point of the EOT is to keep it there and to keep it there forever. So during that payoff period, the exiting shareholders do have a say in what happens. If business is terrible and the company folds just like it would in, any kind of transaction that involved owner financing. And, you would get what you had gotten.
Right. What's been the reaction of ShopBot employees?
Well, we've always been an open books profit sharing organization. And so in some ways, it's not that big of a change for them. But they are kind of coming into contact now with the idea that they're going to be participating more in the governance side. And that potentially, 10 years out or sooner, they'll be also participating more in the profit sharing side. So they're pretty excited about all of that. But the bottom line, we're just a small business, and everybody's kind of tuned into getting the next tool out the door.
Right. I'm sure that's the case. What's just getting away from the EOT for a moment? What's your perspective now on the future of CNC manufacturing, and particularly in this smaller market that you had focused on for so many years?
Well, on the positive side, as we see business coming back from the pandemic, which it is, I think, certainly in any of our kind of construction-related businesses, our business has been relatively strong after the first quarter or two of the pandemic. Certainly, we're back at the same level of sales we were at, and we never had to cut employees. So I feel pretty fortunate in that. But on the positive side, there is more of an emphasis, I think, nationally in sort of entrepreneurism, starting small businesses and small manufacturing. It's not like everybody's going to go out and do it, but it doesn't take much of a shift to bring things back to impact the market a little. So I'm encouraged to see people starting businesses, and some of those are small manufacturing operations that we hope to serve, that woodworkers are involved in, that kind of thing. I think that's positive. And along with that, the purchasers, whether they're consumers or businesses, I think are increasingly likely to consider whether buying something that's built and supported here in the US offers advantages over imports. From the point of view of tool sales, we compete with importers. The handful of people in the US who make CNC tools, we're basically all friends, and we're struggling with the low cost of the imported competition that has lots of advantages that we don't have. I see less emphasis on that. So more manufacturing happening, a little bit of a increased interest in purchasing domestically. All of that's good. I think that's encouraging. And the technology continues to, despite the fact that we're having trouble getting chips and things like that, the technology.
Yeah, like everybody else.
The technology is improving. CNC digital fab is getting easier. There are going to be more things happening that combine CNC and 3D printing and all of that kind of strategy. CNC will be more portable, more affordable, easier to use, and hopefully we'll be there.
It sounds great, Ted. Well, I appreciate you taking time to talk about this. I think it's fascinating, and I wish you a lot of luck and ShopBot a lot of luck going forward. I've enjoyed following you over the last 2.5 decades. It's great fun.
Well, we're looking forward to the next 2.5 decades. And just as an aside, if anybody has any questions about employee ownership trusts or anything we can help explain about how we did it, I think every case of every transition is unique, and people only do it once. It's actually hard to find help. Either Jeannie Taylor, ShopBot's CEO, or I would be happy to talk to anybody about it.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Ted. This has been really wonderful.
Good talking to you, Will.
That's it for today. If you're looking for more of our podcasts, you can find all of them at woodworkingnetwork.com/podcasts and in popular podcast channels. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks again to today's sponsor, FDMC Magazine. If you have a comment or a topic you'd like us to explore, contact me at will.sampson@woodworkingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening.